Think we're good to go now? Thank you, guys. Good morning, everyone. Well, morning. Hopefully, everyone's got coffee. I wanted to kick things off with our presentation, Automate to Elevate. I'm going to make real quick introductions and kind of slide through our team here on both sides of me. So, my name is Roman Novikowski. I am a Chief Growth Officer for OSC Edge. OSC Edge is a Cook Inlet Region Incorporated entity underneath their ANC umbrella. Um, I'm going to go over to Lee if you want to make an introduction.
Yeah, slight hard time hearing. Okay, there we go. CTO, Lee Hendrickson, OSC Edge, co-founder as well.
Corey Ogletree, CIO for OSC Edge.
Joshua Jackson, Senior Developer for Optica Security.
Richard Jackson, Operations Manager for Optica Security.
Okay, I want to start out with compliance. A lot of you might look at compliance as a dirty word, right? It causes a lot of friction within our industry as well as within our customers, right? But it's very important because it gets us to a point where we can start to be secure in our networks. So I want to ask Rich, can you kind of go through what is compliance? What does it mean for us?
Yeah, so DoD compliance in general is making sure all you're minimizing your risk overall in your network as much as possible, right? So so all the DoD folks around here and obviously in this conference, it's your ACAS scan, so that's your vulnerability risk. It's your STIGs and compliancy settings, so that's all your NIST controls and all your STIG controls, and then overall, your documentation, all of that plays into showing that each site individually poses a minimal risk to the DoD. So do they have policies, procedures, documentation? Do they have clean ACAS scans? Do they have clean STIG scans and compliancy overall?
Okay. And Corey, this is as CIO and as a CISSP, can you talk about where compliance comes from? What guides us in compliance?
So a lot of our compliance comes actually from the federal government. When we look at FISMA that is enacted by Congress, as well as the previous authorization acts that they provided for us, it was mainly there to make sure that we protect our security information. As you know, we've over the last 3 to 4 years, even longer than that, 10, 15 years, decades, security has been a really big issue. A lot of our information has been taken away from us, and you see it in other technologies from other countries. And our federal government decided that we needed to put a stop to it. One of the main things is securing our infrastructure. Start with the top-down policy and let it flow down to the products that we put into our networks.
Okay, and the framework from NIST 800.173, what does that do for us? Or for not only for industry, but also for the DIB?
Well, one of the things that it does is it guides us and let us know how we should implement a lot of these technologies. A lot of these policies, these procedures, is more than just technology out there. It's people, it's processes. And all of that is designed to help secure us from a defense in depth and layered approach when you combine all of it together. We've implemented these frameworks, so we're not just throwing tools and technologies in different locations and not really knowing where it needs to go. These frameworks are designed to help us identify our weak points, identify our areas, our problem childs, and help us identify what needs to go there. If it's a policy that needs to go there, if it's a technology that needs to go there, if it's a person that needs to be in place in that particular location. That is what these frameworks are there to help us and guide us, so we're not just throwing money at a situation or a process that will not give us a return on investment.
So Lee, as our CTO and co-founder, working in industry for
17 years.
17 years, right? 20. So what have you seen in changes within our customers in terms of what compliance is, how they expect it to protect our network? Because we tend to say being compliant doesn't necessarily mean you're secure, and being secure doesn't necessarily mean that you are compliant. So what changes have you seen as cybersecurity has become more important in what we do?
Yeah, I mean a lot of it is the DoD just creating CCRIs and CORAs and things of that nature. The CORA has just gotten really, really hard now. CCRIs, everybody moaned about. CORA is 2-3 times harder. They introduced the concept of KEORs, or key indicator of risk, and it causes your score to go down substantially if you have one. So gathering up all the policies, gathering up all the ACAS scans and the CKLs and evaluate STIG. DoD's become and contractors as well. It's become a real chore. It's become Excel spreadsheets. It's become tracking documents in one place or another. And so that's what we're trying to solve, or have solved.
Okay, so what used to be called CCRI, now what we see it as being called CORA. What is that expected to do for industry?
It's supposed to assess where you are, basically all the various STIGs and policies, and it gives you a score at the end of it. So if you don't get like an 80 or a 90 or a 70, you don't pass. Now, some of the scoring assessment, and not that it's an assessment now, so they don't necessarily ding you as hard, but they are dinging you as hard. So without that, if you come in low on that score, it's a very bad day.
Okay, so we talked about where we can automate, right? There's a lot of different tools to automate AIs. So as the core it stands right now, what we've seen, right, starting to roll out, how manual of a process is that right now?
It's extremely painful. I mean, if anyone's gone through a CCI or a CORA, you have these spreadsheets with STIGs and vulnerabilities and ACAS scans, and these spreadsheets just go on and on and on. Sometimes they're tens of thousands of lines. The admin has to go out. They have to fix the problem. Then they cross off, line 30, line 173, and then next thing you know, there's more STIGs, there's more vulnerabilities. Somebody missed a scan. So it's when it comes time for a CORA, you see organizations really, really scramble. So getting all this in one place and knowing exactly where you are without having to scramble at the last second. Also, admins who should be doing other things, the admins are now spending all of their time doing this. I mean, literally, they're spending 12 hours a day, if not more, scrambling at the last second. So, our goal was to make this simple and to make it so that you're not doing that, and that the admin can focus on their job.
Okay, so every time I hear the word manual, it's a manual process. A couple of things come to my mind, right? The sheer amount of people that it takes to get you through that process. Also, there's a lot of room for error, right? Error gets injected into someone doesn't check a box, right? And it ultimately comes back and says, oh, you've got this KEOR because someone missed that step. So can you kind of walk through that and how that error prevents a network, an enclave?
I mean, anytime you're relying on a human being in a manual check, whether it's a STIG or a CKL or whatever people are doing, and you're manually putting in a policy that may or may not be right, may not. Anytime you do that, you're absolutely right. You're going to lower your score. And when it comes down for the CORAs, I mean, you're looking at sometimes 4 to 10 people scrambling around trying to get this fixed. And then somebody comes in and they say, hey, you have a problem. KEOR, they're gonna nail you on that. I mean, they're gonna give you a day to fix it, and sometimes it's gonna take a lot more than a day to fix that. And now the KEOR is gonna lower your score depending on the area. The boundary is gonna lower it 2 scores, and a non-boundary is gonna lower it 1. So If you're manually doing things and you miss something, I mean, it's going to be a bad day.
And so, what is the ultimate outcome of a failed Cora?
The CG is notified. I think the CG has to sit in a meeting every day, Corey, or is it every day? In Crete.
So normally when you fail a Cora, everyone knows that's when the CG is going to come down hard on you. More meetings, more oversight, daily updates. Everyone's been through that, especially if you come from the RMF world and you have failed that. And on top of that, it does affect your budget. It affects the confidence that the organization has within their environment. So we're not just talking about more meetings and just more stress. We're looking at a financial impact. We're looking at a impact on the confidence in you're able to perform your duties. So it's a lot with the failed Cora. And that's one of the reasons why it is important for us to focus on automation and tools to help us identify our weak points.
Okay, thank you for that. So, that's a good segue into automation. And I'm actually going to throw this at both of you, right? So what typically can be automated? What have we looked at to automate this process?
Yeah, so most of the processes for the DoD right now, even though they are extremely manual and checklists, anything that comes into a checklist can absolutely be automated. So ACAS scans, great example. There's a lot of automation right now in your security centers, but there's not enough automation in there to make your job easy, right? You get to see the data. Well, what we can do is we can take that out of ACAS and then we can automate assigning that to your endpoints, right? We can automate the compliance over a 5-year period, right? We can automate the POAM documentation process. We can automate everything to where instead of having to put into spreadsheets, we're moving out of spreadsheets and we're moving into reproducible processes that I know exactly where I'm at any point in time. So somebody could say, this plugin, where are we at? And we could say, bam, this plugin and bam, bam, bam. Here's exactly where we're at today. Here's what we need to do to be able to move to the future. We can also automate specifically STIGs, right? That's one of the big things. There are, like, as of this last quarter, there are 21,870-ish. I don't remember the exact number, but pretty lot of STIGs. That's not including your NIST STIGs, or not NIST STIGs, my goodness, the NIST checks, NIST 800, 171, or 53, or the CSF if you're looking at getting the cloud solutions. So all of those absolutely can be automated. There's a few of them that are a little bit difficult, but every one of them can. And a lot of people don't even realize all of the STIGs that they have, because when you go to a tool like, say, Evaluate STIG, and I run an eval STIG on a box, what that's going to do is that's going to bring in most of it, about 90% of my checks, but it's not 100%. So a perfect example on Windows is going to bring in all but 11. Well, 11 of those checks, there's going to be 3 actual manuals in there. All right. And then there's going to be 8 documentation STIGs. Well, the issue is those scoring that you get off of that are going to not count that. They get weighted as 0. When they get weighted as 0, you don't show it in your score. So when you're showing leadership your scores right out of these tools, you're not counting for some of those manuals inside of there. So what we do is we are able to pull that in and be able to automate all of that to make sure that you're getting full, complete benchmarks.
Okay, thank you. So let me switch over to you, Lee and Corey. As we look at a cyber contingent, whether it's within industry or at a customer, Army, Air Force, Marine Corps, automation, how does that look for the team, and does it allow the refocus of efforts amongst that team depending on what type of automation that we do? Because we've spoken about templating and auto stigging. So how does that look on a team of, say, 10 cyber defense folks?
It frees them up. It frees them up to get, like you were saying earlier, compliance and security can be 2 different things, but they can focus on their tools. They can focus on their seams, whatever it happens to be. I actually spoke to somebody, unnamed Army program, where the admins were actually quitting, because they were doing the same thing every single day. So once 3 months would go by, they would catch up on the STIGs, and like Josh said, there's another thousands of STIGs coming after 3 months. Now they got to do it all over again. So the admins, IT guys, they didn't sign up to work on STIGs every single day. So they want to do other stuff. So it's just going to free up the staff to do other things.
Okay, so we generally say that there is like an 80-20 rule, right? We can automate approximately 80% of most of these tasks to get people freed up. Where, if that were to hold true, where would those folks be able to focus their attention on?
Well, the IT aspects, they could, more efficient routing if they're a network guy. On cybersecurity, like I was saying, SIEM tools, they can focus on cyber dashboards. There's so many things out there they could be focusing on. If somebody has a system performance issue on a system side, it could get completely missed because they're focused on STIGs, and that's not what we want the staff doing. We want the staff doing their job, and it's more than just cyber compliance.
Okay, so then when I hear that, so some of that staff, instead of manually entering in, manually scanning, manually uploading into EMAS or Exacta, some of those folks could be redirected to incident response or threat hunting.
Absolutely, threat hunting, yeah, threat hunting, incident response, yes.
Okay.
Corey, would you agree?
I do agree. And another thing that they can look at is over the last 5 to 10 years, I've seen a lot of contracts come out with the keyword modernization, everything modernization. We need to modernize. And what we're looking at is when we implement AI and when we implement automation into our tool sets, that allows us to look into the future, 5-10 years into the future, and bring in those tools that can help us perform our jobs better. I've seen a lot of organizations where the system admins, network admins, they're complaining. I got 3 hats on, 4 hats on. I can't possibly catch every single thing that's out there. That is what this tool is there to relieve, is allow them to refocus and identify what will make the warfighter better. And in the end, that's what we're all here to do.
I would say if you're working on a weapon system, if you're working on offensive cyber, what are you doing spending all of your time on cyber compliance? So that's what we're trying to say. Get to the mission.
Okay, so now we have CMMC coming down, right? And compliance is a very big aspect of CMMC. So how does automating what we're looking at right now help the DIB, right, to be CMMC compliant, whether it's at level 1, 2, or 3?
So from personal experience with CMMC, OSC Edge actually going through 2 CMMC assessments. One for us to be a C3PAO, to assess organizations out there in the industry, and another one for us to be a CMMC level 2 ourselves. So we did those assessments back to back. This tool, and we're talking about 100% compliance, no POAMs. This tool will help your organization achieve that. For the industry partners that are out there that needs to become CMMC authorized, and actually that's going to come up very soon where it's going to be a requirement, we can help them get to that point. And not only help them get to that point, let the warfighter feel confident in that they are trusting their data, CUI data, to a industry partner that is secure to the best of their ability, to make sure that we are able to not see another threat agent or a China or anyone from Russia doing a flyby in a jet that we designed.
So CMMC, if I remember correctly, there were 110 controls that we had to abide by, right? And each of those controls had different aspects of that. So we talk about automating. Part of that automation is continuous monitoring, right? So can you kind of walk through how important continuous monitoring and having a a near real-time dashboard reporting metrics of your environment. How important is that?
I think it's very important. One of the things that I've heard a lot is continuous ATO, continuous authorization, but I've yet to actually see that implemented. And I think one of the key issues with that being the case is the continuous monitoring aspects wasn't there. It wasn't kept up. They didn't have the personnel. They didn't have the tool set. They didn't have the experience. They didn't have the data to keep that kept up. And I think this tool allows us, or automation allows us, to get to a point where continuous ATO, continuous authorization can be achieved. We can get to that point with the right experience, with the right tools and optical security. I think that that will actually come into fruition. I know I'm waiting for it. I know everyone in the industry is waiting for it, because we don't want to have to go through accreditations every 3 years. Every time we turn around, a lot of organizations are stuck in 1-year accreditations where they have to go through this every single year. They're not able to make that 3-year mark. And it's mainly because the focus is all on trying to keep up with current events. This allows us to refocus and look into the future and let the tool keep up with current events.
Okay, thank you. So I'm actually gonna switch between both sides, right? So a lot of people hear AI, right? And AI is a big bucket, right? So artificial intelligence, machine learning, natural language processing. We've incorporated AI in many of its forms into automation and templatizing, right? But with that being said, sometimes there is a concern of confidence in what is being done through an AI engine and what's being outputted into, say, EMAS or even managerial reports. So Josh, you've created Optica and have been on the engineering forefront of this. Can you kind of go through what the confidence in that AI tool is, the confidence of compliance?
Yeah, absolutely. So ultimately, every single time you use AI, AI does have a tendency to, it's not necessarily lying, but it has a tendency to exaggerate sometimes or just come up with something. Well, what we've done is we've trained our AI models whenever we generate our documentation on nothing but the data that comes out of the STIG benchmark. So ultimately, we have a very dedicated AI to nothing but STIG management and DoD compliance, and that's all it knows in this world. And we've specifically told it that you can only pull data out of those specific areas, right? You cannot come up with anything else. If you are missing something, then you leave in blank and say, I'm missing it, right? So what we've done is we transformed something that, could possibly give you bad data into now something that whenever I want to say templated documentation. So I want to grab a STIG that say I patch my servers, right? That's a common STIG, patch your servers. So that generally comes with an MFR. And that would be a document that would say something like, yeah, we patch our servers, and it would come with supporting documents. That would be how we patch, and then maybe our monthly patch cadence. Well, what we use AI for is to fill all that out for you. So you put in when you patch and everything, it learns off of that, and it says, okay, so when I want to generate this MFR, I'm going to fill in all of that justification for it. I'm going to go through, I'm going to fill all that data in, and I'm going to present it to you. We call that templated documentation. Once you have that data filled in, you can then read it, look at it. That gives an approver, your ISSO, to be able to go through there and read it and say, I like this. If they like it, they hit approve, and that document now starts answering all of those STIGs for you in the fleet. So within a few minutes, and instead of having thousands of open STIGs across every server, because it would be one per server, right? So if you have 10,000 servers in the fleet or 35,000 workstations or so, that's a lot of open STIGs. One button press, or two technically, one to generate, one to apply. At that point now, I'm closing all those STIGs. Nothing else, no fuss. And it's exactly trained on my data and only my data.
Okay, Rich.
Yeah, I'm going to add a little bit to that. So In addition to that template documentation Josh talks about, what's really great about that template documentation is everything looks the same. So if you have multiple teams that are pulling data together, they're trying to make templates or documentation to show STIGs are closed or vulnerabilities have been addressed. Sometimes that looks differently. Like my networking team is going to do it maybe differently than my systems team or my cyber team, right? And what we do in Optica is that templated documentation looks exactly the same for every finding, with the key details in there that you need to close it out. So from an auditor's perspective, when you come in there and you take a look at that and you start looking at, yeah, that document is solid, it meets the controls, the ISSO or the ISM has signed off on it and said, yeah, it's good. As I go through the documentation from an auditor's perspective and I see that everything matches up, across the board, then that builds confidence that this site has a good plan. They've got solid documentation that's meeting the controls and it's being assessed properly.
So, Rich, hold on to that, right? As a former NEC director, right, what kind of impact do Optica Security tools like Optica Security, what kind of impact would that have made on you and your organization 5-10 years ago?
Yeah, absolutely. So that would have made a tremendous impact. We spent hundreds of overtime hours getting ready for a CCRI or getting ready for an RMF assessment. And, having a tool like Optica would have saved those hundreds and hundreds of man hours that we did overtime. Plus we had to stop doing work or supporting customers, and answering tickets and doing things, while we were getting ready for these inspections and making sure that we were, inspection ready. So from a NEC director and a former, cybersecurity chief in his position, absolutely this tool would save hundreds and hundreds of hours. And then also the other thing it does is it lets you distribute that workload. So all your mission partners out there that have admin rights and things like that, they can come into the tool. We can assign systems endpoints to them so they can see, so now what we've done is not just the Network Enterprise Center had to focus on resolving those vulnerabilities. We can have our mission partners log in and see what's vulnerable in their systems, and they can address that too. So now we've distributed the workload across the installation to come together to get it done. And then from a management perspective, we're able to see the trending analysis. We're able to see those friction points or areas where we're not getting things addressed or assessed properly. And we can start energizing our workforce toward those areas, those high risk areas, like our SQL server that doesn't have an SSP or our IIS server that's completely configured wrong, right? So we find all those vulnerable endpoints that aren't being addressed, and then we can energize resources toward those. So absolutely a major time saver, work saver, labor saver, and like Lee and Corey addressed also, we can get to 80% pretty quickly with this tool. But that 20% we know incrementally gets more difficult as we get close to zero, right? So what it does is allows the team to focus on those hard findings, those ones that take a lot of documentation or have to be very carefully locked down or STIG to make sure they don't break, mission, right? So it lets the team focus on those. Over.
Right, and it also allows, if I'm hearing this correctly, it also allows to identify gaps in compliance where maybe some of the network infrastructure is older, EOL, EOS, right? And you cannot, without a deviation, right, cannot sign off on that, and there needs to be a tech refresh to some degree, not only for compliance but also for capabilities.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in that case, we're able to identify, that we're able to document, maybe elevate that to leadership to explain that we can't, without a tech refresh or without replacement, these vulnerabilities are going to stand. Obviously, the POAM process that we have to fill out and make sure that that's elevated. We're not bogged down by all the ankle biters to get there. We can focus on those high value targets and make sure we're getting there.
Okay, so staying with you,
Okay.
right? So, again, as a former NEC director with a fairly large staff dedicated to cyber engineering and administration, if you had a tool like this at that point in time, where do you think, what kind of manpower savings or time savings or cost savings do you think you would have realized with some form of automation?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think on about a 10,000 endpoint scale, we're looking at probably 600,000 a year on average if we just put numbers to it. Uh, um, but ultimately, I would say that equates to 3 or 4 bodies, on the team that this can replace and do the work for.
Okay. Lee and Corey, do you see any other savings that
Yeah.
these tools, whether it's for an L neck, R neck, large neck, small neck, industry, large company, small company, where do you see savings?
Yeah, I think if you look at it too, from every single time we do this stuff, we send a team in. All this stuff takes a team to go in. And do we really need to be doing that? When we really think about this, why can't we see from the top? Every single neck, for example. Why can't we see all 45 necks? I mean, why are we sending teams out for all this stuff? Or if we are, it should just be a one-day thing. So I think the Army or Air Force, whoever as a whole, this idea that we have to send in these teams all the time and is a little much. Really, I think there's a ton of savings to do there. Even if we're just talking about keeping the people and the actual travel dollars, just getting rid of that, there's a lot of savings. So that's what I'm saying. I mean, also industry. You were talking earlier. You just mentioned industry. I mean, CPARS ratings too, right? I mean, if you fail your CORA, you're not gonna have a good CPARS. So there's an advantage there. But also from industry, from like a product perspective, they're spending to go through an APL. They're spending $500,000 to $1 million. I mean, they're spending a lot of money on this stuff. Optica can go right through that and tell them. So we could probably save industry hundreds of thousands.
Okay, so within the landscape of compliance, specifically infrastructure and cyber compliance, there's lots of tools out there, right? Some tools do certain subsets of compliance, other tools do other subsets. So how is it that we tie all of this, and then what are the benefits of that ingestion of data, right? Whether it's ACAS or a SIEM, that ingestion of data into a single pane of glass, so to speak, and how does that affect one's ability to maintain and continuously monitor a environment for compliance and security?
Yeah, again, single pane of glass, right? You said it kind of answered the question, the actual question, but yeah, I mean, you can see your CORA score. That's the thing. So that's the actual Kiors. We're the only ones who have actually programmed it in. So we know that for a fact. So having all that and being able to see your score all on the same screen, and then without the Excel spreadsheets, being able to run a report to know what you have to fix. I've been through CCRIs before, and it's a disorganized chaos. And this very, very clear. You can go to upper management, CG and 06. You can say, here's where I am, without having to go through all the chaos.
Okay, so environments, there are boundaries within boundaries within boundaries within boundaries, right? Flying all the way up to the Department of Army, right? So we haven't, at least I haven't seen a single tool that would allow at the Army level to drill down into all the way through the very bottom boundary. How effective would that be? And what would that do for the Army?
Yeah, extremely. That's what I was talking about earlier when it comes to the actual cost savings. The organizations, they're sending in these teams all the time. I mean, if there's absolutely no reason to do that. Netcom they should be able to look into every single neck at any given time, or post-camp sensations. They should be able to look at it at any given time to see what the status is. They should know what the CORA score is. They should know what the ATO status is, continuous monitoring. And to your point, I mean, what we do now is no one has any idea what's going on. They send a team in, they try to figure out if they're okay, if they're, where are they? Then they go out, then they come back a year later, like Corey said, or sometimes 3 years later. But it's a very unnecessary process.
Okay, so at like what we were talking at, from the Army all the way down to through the necks, right? So obviously there are vulnerabilities that are found every day that are exploited. So this type of a tool or any tool, how does this give the ability to address a flash finding, right? Very important. This is a vulnerability. It's being exploited right now.
I'm going to turn that one over to Josh, actually.
Yeah. So ultimately, if I have a vulnerability that's being exploited right now, that's going to be seen on a couple of our different data sources. One of the data sources specifically ACAS. So I'm going to be able to see the compliance of the endpoint that's getting exploited. I'm going to be able to then see where it's at compliance-wise. And then I can go in and I can say, hey, I need to apply additional sticks to then fix whatever it is. Or we need to then patch so that'll then allow me to swap over into my Mecum, or it'll allow me to swap over into, say like if you're Red Hat, it'd be like Satellite, or if you're Ubuntu, that'd be their patch service. I can then go in there, patch those vulnerabilities from there, and then I can go back into the tool and I can rescan. When I rescan, I can show clean at that point. So that allows us to be able to very quickly say, hey, there's an active exploit. Let's push that. And then I can then see all of that trickle in, and then I can say, all right, now we're compliant. So we went out of compliance and then back into compliance, and I can see that trend data go up and down. And it's actually really cool because when one of my favorite ones was the shell shock vulnerability. That was a massive one. Or the Log4j, that was even bigger. But you could just see this massive spike of vulnerabilities just pop up, and you could see where the tool was starting to get it, and it was like, all right, it got it, and you see that big bell curve, and then it was just straight back down, and it went up a couple times, but it was pretty awesome to see because you'd see it hit up. We saw it. All right, start patching, start submitting stuff. People got it back down, and then it just kept going until finally it trickled out, and then that's not in the environment anymore. So it's very, very visible to be able to see problem, fix, solution.
And the key to cyber security and compliance is that training and analysis, that continuous monitoring, continuous evaluation, right? So we had an example of we had to roll back a VM server, so it was compliant, everything was good for the inspection. A month later, all of a sudden this thing's bleeding. We caught it almost immediately. So we're like, all right, why is this now? All these STIGs aren't applied to it. Well, because somebody had rolled it back to a date and time prior to the STIGs being applied, and then they didn't go back and reapply the STIG. So that continuous monitoring, continuous evaluation, catch that. In regards to those, high risk vulnerabilities that Josh was just speaking about, and Lee, this tool will constantly catch those. So as your VPN connected systems connect in, they start popping hot for these, and then we address them and get them taken care of right away. So you can literally get it down to the last endpoint. And when I was a NEC director, that was one of the major time laborious exercises, is trying to trap those spreadsheets, try to track these things down. Because when your commander comes down and says you have to get to zero, that is a hard challenge to get absolutely to zero. But with optical security, they're constantly being scanned, they're constantly being evaluated. So if whether they get rolled back or whether they pop in because they haven't been on the network or turned off, we're going to catch them, we're going to find them, and we're going to get to zero.
So we spoke about a manual process versus a automated process. How easy, just a few years ago, right? How easy was it to miss or skip over something that was important going through spreadsheets, right? How many spreadsheets were involved? How many lines on each of the spreadsheets?
Yeah, absolutely. So literally thousands of lines on these spreadsheets. Human error, right? The humans are human. They're prone to error. So it's absolutely easy. And guess what? As soon as you export that spreadsheet from ACAS or export it, from your STIG compliancy, it's outdated immediately because new systems are popping in, new vulnerabilities are coming in. So it's almost impossible to get to zero or to have that confidence that you're close to zero with spreadsheets and manual process, because it's not continuous monitoring, continuous evaluation. It's a point in time.
So we've had the chance to work with our mission partners, Army, Air Force. and have deployed this particular tool out there to them, right? In addition to going through our own DISA APL process. So can you kind of go through the feedback that we've received from the deployments that we've had so far?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll touch on it. Everybody that sees our tool looks at the dashboard, sees the what kind of endpoints we're pulling in, what kind of data points we have, the reporting that we have, and all that, and they absolutely love it. They can see that that's a huge time saver. It's going to really put the information in the hands of the leadership, and also it becomes a work tool for the system administrators, right? So even on the SA side, they come and take a look at it. They're like, "Hey, this is great. I can come in. It becomes a work generator. I know what to do." I'm going to pass it over to Josh because he did the install, so he'll follow up.
Yeah, it's actually funny. So when we were going through the DISA APL, kind of on this topic, they liked the tool so much because of what it was doing that they actually requested us to leave it and then pilot with them. So that's what we did. So we're actually sitting right now on the DISA APL on that exact topic. What we do is we allow you to be able to take a manual process and turn to an automated process. So anybody right now that's going through all that stuff manual could very much so benefit. And the great thing about it is when we have a customer partner that says, "Hey, we're spending all this time and we need something that's going to be able to help, cut savings or, help with savings, cut costs." This allows them to be able to do that. Specifically with the APL, they didn't want to get rid of their auditors. Of course not. I mean, you obviously have to have auditors for them. But what they wanted to do is be able to have those auditors be able to do more work, right? So instead of having to do work slower, right, where I'm having to go through our specific APL packet, that's the DISA approved product list, it was 1,576 total STIGs that we had to go through. It took me about a week and a half to go through it. With our tool at the very end, I said, "Hey, now let's go through that same process once we got all the way through," which, by the way, 0 findings. So we went through all with 0 findings. Once we got through, let's do that same audit with just my tool. And they were like, "Yeah, sure, let's do it." So they had the director come down, everybody came on down, and we all looked at it. And I was like, "All right, so let's pop the STIGs in there, scan the box, bring them in. Oh, and there we go. We went through it. Now you just need to fact check these 15. And they're like, "Wow, we went from a week and a half to an hour. And we had the same exact results. I mean, word for word, the same thing, us manual versus that." So mission partners very much so love us. That they are very happy with what we offer so far.
Okay. Lee, I do want to give some time for our audience to ask questions, but you've been involved in our deployments into our customers. Can you think of anything else that they've commented on or directed us to do within these deployments?
Yeah, I think it's just once they see it and they're doing it, they don't want to go back. I mean, that's really what happens.
So it's like compliance crack.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. All right. I set aside 15 minutes for the audience to ask questions. Anybody have any questions? I can give you a mic. Mike's got the mic.
Hey, Lieutenant Buccini here. Thank you so much for what you're doing, because I've had to do these STIGs myself, and it's probably the worst part of my job. One question that I had is, how do you handle the not applicable cases? So, for example, I was building a web application, and I had to go through the application security development checklist, which has about, 20 items related to the session IDs. Well, most modern web applications use JWATs instead. So is your application able to handle the null case where it's like, okay, there is no session IDs, but that's because we're using something more secure, so these are not applicable?
Nope. Yeah. Fantastic question. So we came against that exact same problem about 2.5 years ago. So I fully understand what you're talking about. So just because I have a STIG, it should be not applicable, right? A lot of people think, oh, well, if it's not applicable, then, we just kind of leave it alone. But that is not the case, right? So sometimes you have to add documentation. Sometimes you have to do that. And sometimes the reason why it's not applicable is because you have a higher level, but that STIG might not say it's not applicable, correct? Yeah. So what we've done is we allow you to be able to add in documentation that does not just do open or closed. It does open, right? So not a finding, open, not applicable, and not reviewed. So what we've done is we allow you to be able to link that in to that STIG and then set to those grouping of systems, because it might be applicable on some systems, but some systems it would not. So then you can drill down to that granular, take that, point that at your new compliance. So in our repository of frameworks, we have NIST, we have SOC 2, we have obviously just a STIG. We got a couple of them there. PCI 3, DSS, there's a bunch in there. What we do is we allow you to be able to add your own. So just like Keyors, where you can remove Keyors or add Keyors depending on your flavor of organization, we do the exact same thing with compliance. So you can go add your own frameworks inside of there and then point that document to it. So now every time I do a STIG scan, it's going to come in there, show not applicable, show the documentation where that is an issue, and then it's going to link to that new compliance framework for you. So now whenever an auditor sits down, they can walk through reciprocity, make sure that everything's good to go, and then make sure that you're getting what you need.
Hello? Oh, great question, or great answer. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, not a problem. Fantastic question.
Anybody?
I have another question if nobody else
Shoot.
has one.
Shoot.
So sorry, I had to step out, so I didn't get the continuous monitoring portion. So what's the trigger for that? Are you just running them like on a cron schedule, so once an hour, once a minute? Or do you have a trigger-based system where, hey, someone went in, they changed the configuration on my Windows box, and now that triggers a run of your automatic system?
Yep. So that's configurable. So if you want to configure it to run continuously, then it'll run continuous and based upon file change. So we hash files and then we say, all right, if anything changes within, what I know is to be compliance, because you don't have to hash every file when you're talking compliance. You only have to hash the files that have the STIGs in them, right? So we do that. And then if a file changes that we say, oh, okay, I know that needs to happen, then I immediately rerun that and then go. That, of course, is slightly more impactful on the system to do that. So we also have the ability in, say, very high performance, but in high impact systems, you could just run like once an hour or once a week, so that is configurable. You do not have to do that mode, but you can if you want. And it's not that much resources. It's a little bit more impactful. And sometimes you just don't have that extra resource. So you can do both.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, right? So we have connectors that go out into devices, endpoints, right? And that information is kind of coming, and that's why I say near real time, right? That information is constantly coming back into our dashboard, and then that dashboard at any given time in near real time will give you a sense of where you are within this compliance spectrum, right? Specifically for this would be Quora.
They're right here.
Test. Hey, good morning. I have a few questions, hopefully very simple questions. The first one is, what AI model are you all using to train on the STIG data?
Yeah, great question. So we have two. Depending on if we're in the cloud, then we're going to use the backend for ChatGPT, an organization. But if you're on-prem, which everybody in the government's going to basically be on-prem, that's going to be Llama, local Llama. We
Local
go through specialized, that way we can run in a disconnected network specifically.
So follow up to that, how do you then address the CUI STIGs within Llama? I'm not sure if Llama is approved for CUI, so how do you address that?
Yeah, so anything that goes into the anything goes into SIPR, right, or CUI, you have the choice to either run it or not. Now we've STIGged it, so and we've gone through the APL, so we do have approval to run that. But if the organization does not want to approve that model to go in there, then they would not be able to deploy that model. But we have gone through the APL. We do have those STIGs in there. So you could just add that to your ATO or your approved process and then put it in there. If DISA said that you can do it, you should be able to do it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Okay. So have you all looked into any integration with some tools that the Army's currently using, such as Ask Sage?
So yeah, we actually do have some integration, so we can integrate with EMAS
Okay.
right now. We also have integrations in and out with ACAS as well. We utilize Evaluate STIG. We have DISA SCAT that we utilize, and we don't, just to make sure that I'm understood, we do not make our own checks for STIGs. We do, but not in the Evaluate STIG and the ACAS or the SCAT. What we do is we use those tools. So if an auditor shows up, they're not going to say, well, hopefully they will, but they're going to say, hey, I want you to run eval STIG, Evaluate STIG. But I'm not going to let you run your version. I want you to go to the website, download it fresh, load it on the server, and then run it.
Correct.
And that's what we do. We do that same process when we run it. Because what the whole point of Optica is whatever the auditor sees, we see. So we're not coding those checks ourselves. And because if I did that, right, so say that like there's a bunch of other tools on the floor right now, they code their own, and there's nothing wrong with that. We do that for the STIGs that are not an Evaluate STIG. But the issue if I do that is what happens if there's a bug in Evaluate STIG, which there are. I mean, there's 2 of them right now in Windows. Right now, Windows 2019, there are 2 bugs in that STIG, 100%. The issue is if I, Optica, fix that bug, those 2 bugs myself, you're not getting those as open findings when you should be. They're bugs. You should see them as open findings so that way you know how to document them and explain them. But if you sit down for an audit and you're expecting 100% and you get a 99% because there's 2 open, how do you answer that? You might not be able to answer that. So now you have findings that are open for no reason. We solve that problem that way.
Interesting. Okay. And then last question. I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. 100% STIG rule accountability with your tool?
100% for OSs and then applications. There is some STIGs like mobile devices and stuff that we
Okay.
do not have.
Okay.
So
Okay.
so the all the devices that we have supportable. So that's going to be like Ubuntu, Red Hat, Windows, right? So Apache would be some
Correct.
stuff that we have. That would be like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Adobe, all of those. We don't have BlackBerry. Yeah, we are working on adding those. Our main goal in the next, depending on Lee, the main goal in the next, say, year to 2 years is to have 100%. There will not be a STIG out there that we do not have coded.
Okay. Outstanding. Thank you very much.
Right. And I want to just one thing, kind of backtracking onto your AI question. Can you be a little bit more specific as to a public AI versus a local AI?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a public AI that would be things like, say, OpenAI, ChatGPT. They do have FedRAMP IL6 right now, accreditation. So that would be what we would consider a public AI. That would be going out into an organization mode, so that way your data is not trained. It's only used in your isolated. But I'm still uploading my data or your data into a server that you do not control, right? And that would be the public. Sometimes that's fine. In a lot of organizations, that's fine because it's an IL6 or IL5 container, so no issues. Sometimes that does not work, right? Specifically, if you're in an ATO where it's heavily restricted or you do not have outside access, that's not going to be fine. In those cases, we utilize local AI. Local AI just tends to be a little bit slower. And that's okay because I would rather be hardened, right, and local and make sure we're good and still have the features and then be able to keep everything isolated. So we do have the option for both.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else?
It's right here. Yep.
Hello. So if I work for a NEC and I want to use this product, how do I go to my director, my ISSM, and say, what's the next steps? Do I go to Chest? Do I go to a vendor and get a quote? How do I know? You talked about the APL. Are you on the APL or have an ATO? Or what are my next steps forward?
Yeah, it's on the APL. I mean, you would have to go to your NEC director. I mean, Rich, correct me if I'm wrong. You would have to for procurement. Yeah. Yeah.
And all right, and we're in the process of having agreements with value-added resellers, so there'll be a marketplace to gain access to this particular product. Chess H would be one place, right? A little bit more geared towards products and software. Some of the VARs we've been talking with a couple of the larger VARs out there. So this product is attainable, or the services are attainable. And I just want to say that, we with this product, there's a couple different paths, right? So you have the ability to just plug it into your environment. Green suitors, blue suitors would actually operate it. And then there is also a services model where we could actually contribute to upgrading to a core, right? So that we make sure that at a certain point that you're going to meet that compliance, and then help you maintain that going on in the future for continuous monitoring. I'm sorry, what was that?
The question that he asked was, can it be an app or a hardware appliance? And the answer is both. So if you wanted a hardware appliance, we can absolutely ship one of those out to you. It'll all be pre-installed, pre-configured, pre-ready to go. You just rack, stack, turn on. And then, or if you would like an application, so say that you wanted to run it on your own Gold Image, we can support that as well. We can also support containerization. So if you have a container platform, we can run it in a containerized environment. Just depending on your lab, what you want, things like that.
Another question in the back, Rich. We paid him, by the way.
Yeah, so if I have all my configuration for my OSs stored in code, like or in version control, how long would it take to run one of these jobs so that I could run it, for example, in my continuous integration within my Git server? Could I make sure that, I'm making a change to my configuration, I'm not going to experience regressions from a STIG perspective?
That's a good question. So it depends on, it depends a lot of things. It depends on network latency between the two systems. But ultimately, I find that most benchmarks on servers, as long as the data doesn't get above about a terabyte in size, it'll take anywhere from 2 to 10 minutes to run. Just sort of depending on the size thereof. So if we're talking about so say that you have Git change your Oracle database configurations, but then I have the entire schema on the back end inside of there, that could be like tens and millions of lines. That would be a lot harder to it'd take a lot longer to go through that. But if you're talking about just a general OS, 2 or 3 minutes. So I can scan a Red Hat box right now in about 45 seconds.
Is that a full scan, or is that just a diff of the previous known good version plus the configuration changes?
That would be a full scan of all of the file checks and then a diff of all of the finding checks. So when I run a find command, right, that's going to take, that's going to take a couple minutes to come back, or seconds to come back. That's not an us thing, that's just an OS thing, right? Depending on the speed of your storage. So that would be a diff on those. Now, if you wanted to run a complete scan, depending on the performance of your server, it could be 2 or 3 minutes. When I run a full scan on ours, one of the testing servers we have is a couple years old. It's running DDR3 memory. We're running SATA drives. It takes about 3 minutes to 4 minutes to come back, but it's not bad. And that's Optica Security itself. So there's a lot of files on that.
I think we'll open up for one more question. And then I think our time is over. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Feel free to come up to us at the table, or we're up on the second floor, table L28, so right at the T on this side. Thank you.